Alright, so what we're going to be doing today, guys, is we're going to do a full review of Daryl Dixon's Canon storyline from the pre-apocalypse all the way up until Season 9, Episode 6, where Rick quote-unquote disappeared and the big 6-year time jump happened. What we're going to do is we're going to cover all the main plot points related to Daryl leading up to that point. And I just wanted to say, I don't own any of these pictures. All these images are owned by AMC and other companies. So we're going to start off with what we know about Daryl's childhood. We know that he had a pretty rough childhood. His father was a drunk and he was very abusive to Merle and Daryl. This caused Merle to become more of a role model leader figure to Daryl. And Merle was also in and out of juvie and things like that for stuff he was doing. So whenever Daryl didn't have his dad or Merle, this caused him to gain many of his loner persona, fend for himself persona, and really just gave him that kind of hunter-gatherer mindset, like, fight for myself, this is what I need to do. And his childhood pretty much reflects what he has become eventually in the show. So the next information we have about Daryl comes from the 2013 Xbox 360 game, Walking Dead Survival Instinct. In the game, basically, you play as Daryl before he finds the group/team family, and yes, it is canon. So the outbreak occurs shortly after the death of Daryl's dad, Will, and Daryl joins a group with his half-uncle Jess, a police officer, a man by the name of Jim Blake, and a man named Warren Bedford. So Uncle Jess gets bit from a bite, and he turns, and then Daryl finds Merle after his uncle turns, who had been shooting people with a rifle because he thought that they were the U.S. military trying to arrest him, which obviously he was on drugs. And then Merle joins the group. Daryl and Merle then fight off a gang in a bar, and Daryl gets his crossbow back. And then after the fight, Merle goes missing. Daryl then finds this sick elderly couple who also happen to be Amy and Andrea Harrison's parents. And so they say that the last evacuation point in Atlanta is Firesign Stadium. And they arrive at Firesign Stadium, and there's one helicopter left at the stadium by the time they get there, and all of the group gets on except Daryl. And then Merle pulls up in a Humvee with a mounted turret on top of it, and Daryl holds off the walkers with it. The survivors end up taking off in the helicopter, and Merle told Daryl not to get on because he realized that the pilot of the helicopter was actually bit, and it would only be moments before the helicopter crashed and the survivors meet their demise. So not much is known about how Daryl and Merle ended up meeting Team Family. There's a lot of assumptions, but there's nothing really confirmed. And Daryl's first TV appearance was in Season 1, Episode 3, titled Tell It to the Frogs. And he acts as the group's main hunter-gatherer, going out hunting, getting food for everybody, and basically showing them all his survival skills. And Rick had just arrived, and Daryl finds out Merle was left in the city handcuffed to a roof, which obviously you're going to be like, what the hell, this dude just locked up my brother to the roof in the middle of Atlanta that's swarming with walkers, so he gets pretty upset, obviously. And then he's unsuccessful in finding Merle and no cure in the CDC, so they end up leaving Atlanta, and Daryl actually leaves Atlanta on Merle's motorcycle. So in Season 2, we see Daryl start to become more involved with the group when he acts as the main lookout for Sophia whenever she's lost in the walker attack on the highway. And he tries to help Carol cope with the loss and everything like that, such as the episode Cherokee Rose, which is pretty much the beginning to their brother-sister kind of relationship. And during the search for Sophia, he's knocked from his horse, and he starts to hallucinate and he sees Merle where Merle says that he spent more time searching for Sophia than he did his own brother, and that kind of like hits Daryl. And then whenever they find Sophia in the barn already turned, Daryl helps Carol cope more, and he starts to help defend the group from hostiles such as Randall and Randall's group and the herd that ends up attacking the farm in the end of season 2. So in season 3, once they get to the prison, everybody's all settled in, and then Lori ends up dying during childbirth when giving birth to Judith, and this makes Rick go pretty much insane. So Daryl and Herschel step up to the plate and help lead the group in the prison while Rick is kind of in one of his lapses, I guess you could call it. And during the conflict with the governor, Daryl attempts to free 2 of the prison group who are imprisoned at Woodbury, and he also sees while he's at Woodbury that Merle is indeed still alive and now working for the governor and sporting a crafty new knife hand, which is pretty cool. So Daryl takes Merle back to the prison, where Merle now shows his loyalty to the governor, and he kidnaps Michonne. And then when he's on his way to Woodbury, he drops her off instead of taking her all the way back to Woodbury, and attacks some of the governor's men and dies at the hands of the governor. And then at the end of season 3, Daryl finds Merle reanimated, and he bawls his eyes out and has to put him down. So at the start of season 4, a really bad flu breaks out in the prison. A lot of people are getting sick and dying, and everybody's kind of like, well, how are we going to stop this? And Carol takes the initiative and kills Karen and David, who were both sick, to prevent it from spreading. And Rick finds out about this when she tells him and exiles her, which really upsets Daryl because she's like his sister. And then the governor launches a final assault on the prison with a tank, multiple trucks, heavy firearms, and Daryl helps Beth, who is pretty much in shock after the governor just beheaded her father right in front of her. And also, honorable mention, he throws a grenade down the tank, completely destroys the tank. And afterwards, Daryl and Beth both escape, and they travel on for several days. And they hold up in a little house type thing. And the duo ends up getting separated briefly, and Daryl sees a car with a couple men in it kidnap Beth, and the car has a white cross on the back windshield. So he follows the car until he meets the Claimers, who are led by Joe, and he's kind of forced to stay in their group. And they end up coming across Rick, Michonne, and Carl on a road during the night, and one of the Claimers attempts to rape Carl, the others attempt to kill Rick and Michonne. So Daryl obviously helps fight back, and they kill all the Claimers, and they end up all getting to Terminus, where they find out that Terminus is a trap, and they get locked in a red train car with the rest of the prison group. So the entire group is at Terminus, locked in the train cars, and they find out that Terminus is full of cannibals, and they plan on pretty much eating the entire group, and they take all their belongings. So Carol, who had been exiled by Rick, shows up and blows up the Terminus defenses, and she pretty much sends a walker horde right in, wiping out mostly all of Terminus's members and freeing Team Family. And Daryl and Carol have a real nice reunion, and then after they meet Father Gabriel and everything, they see another car with a white cross on the back, and they decide to follow it all the way back to Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. And Carol is actually captured by the cops who are running the hospital, and Daryl goes back to the group to get them to rescue Beth and Carol. So Carol is saved, but Beth is killed by Dawn in a standoff in the hospital hallway. Daryl abruptly pulls his gun and shoots Dawn right in the forehead. And so the group ends up going on the road after that, and they run into this dude named Aaron on the road, and he's a recruiter for Alexandria Safe Zone. So they're all brought in, given jobs, and in an attempt to find more recruits, Daryl and Aaron actually find out that this group named the Wolves has been stalking Alexandria, and they end up walking into a wolf's trap, and they're rescued by none other than Morgan Jones, and then they bring him right back to Alexandria to finish off season 5. So the wolves actually end up attacking Alexandria, while at the same time a herd is heading directly towards Alexandria because of a horn set off, and Daryl is ordered to lead the herd away on his bike, and he ends up leading most of the herd away, and he runs into Sherry and Dwight in the woods, and they end up taking his bow and his bike after he helps them, and he finds a fuel truck afterwards and meets up with Abraham and Sasha, who were also leading away part of the herd. The three of them run into a group of saviors on the road. They're basically saying, like, we're going to take your stuff, blah, 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 or we're going to kill you. And Daryl pulls out a rocket launcher and blows them all to smithereens. And then they get back to Alexandria, where it's currently overrun, just swarming with walkers. So Daryl, being the smart guy he is, dumps some fuel from the truck into the pond and then shoots the rocket launcher right into the pond, setting it on fire and distracting all the walkers to walk into it. And so after that, after they get Alexandria all cleaned up, Rick and Daryl go on a supply run, and they run into this guy named Jesus, who ends up introducing them to the Hilltop and Kingdom. And then they find out about the Saviors, and they launch an attack on a Savior outpost, which they think is the main Savior compound, and they kill everyone inside. And then afterwards, Daryl, Rosita, and Denise are also out on a supply run. And they have a run-in with Dwight, who now has Daryl's crossbow and some new attire, and some other saviors. And they also discover that Eugene and Abe are both there, and they hold off the saviors, but Denise is killed by Dwight, getting shot in the eye. And Daryl attempts to track the saviors, but he gets captured after this and then brought to the clearing where Negan and all the saviors are, and the rest of the group is all there. And that's the season 6 finale. So Negan had just killed Abraham, which really ticks off Daryl, so he gets up and punches Negan out of anger, which ends up causing Glenn to get his skull smashed by Lucille. So after the lineup, Daryl is taken prisoner back to Sanctuary, where he's at for most of the season. But he's then freed with the help of Sherry, Dwight's now ex-wife, and she helps him escape to Hilltop, where he gets there and they're like, this isn't safe for you, you're a fugitive. And they relocate him to Kingdom, and he's at Kingdom for a while, and he gets back to Hilltop, and he apologizes to Maggie for being the cause of Glenn's death. She forgives him, and afterwards, Negan launches a surprise attack on Alexandria, and it's actually held off by the Alexandrians, the Kingdom, Hilltop, and Shiva comes out of nowhere. And Daryl's actually wielding this pretty sick gun. I don't know what it's called, but if anybody has any ideas what it is, please comment it below. I would like to know. During the All Out War storyline, Team Family attacks the Sanctuary with a massive herd by shooting out the glass windows on the Sanctuary, which attracts the noise. And then Daryl accidentally sabotages the entire plan and sends a 18-wheeler through the wall of the Sanctuary, which unintentionally made it easier for the Saviors to fight their way out. And in another battle at a Savior compound, Rick and Daryl are going through a building, and they're actually caught by Morales, who is from season 1. I don't know if you guys remember him, but Daryl notices who he is, he acknowledges it, and basically kills him on the spot. And then afterwards, Rick and Daryl had acquired a lot of weapons and supplies, and they end up getting in a fight on the side of the road, and some gas spills, blah, 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 and the weapons catch on fire and get destroyed. So after Team Family finally defeats Negan and the Saviors in the season 8 finale, Daryl exiles Dwight and tells him that if he ever sees his face around him, he's gonna kill him on the spot. 18 months after Team Family beats the Saviors, Daryl and Eugene are left to lead the remaining Saviors at Sanctuary, and Daryl doesn't really like it, so he kind of passes on the leadership. And while the group is trying to redirect the herd from heading towards Alexandria and going over Rick's new bridge, Rick and Daryl end up falling into a sinkhole, and they have some heart-to-heart conversations down there about Carl, things like that. Things get kind of heated, but it's a pretty emotional scene. Rick helps Daryl out of the sinkhole, and they share their last conversation before Rick goes off and falls off his horse. It's a pretty sad scene, and the last time Daryl sees Rick is when Rick blows up the bridge to save the entire group. Everyone thinks Rick is dead or gone, and yeah, that pretty much wraps up Daryl's storyline up until season 9, episode 6 in the time jump. So I do plan on making a part 2 to this video that will pertain to during the time jump Daryl, after the time jump, and up until whatever point we're at in the show. Maybe even if the show's over by that point, I'll make a video on it, as long as my videos are still getting attention, stuff like that. But yeah, guys, please sub, like, drop a comment, share with your friends. Thank you.